Hello, welcome to the Raising Athletes podcast. My name is Kirsten Jones. I'm a peak performance and sports parenting coach and the author of this new book, Raising Empowered Athletes. It's out everywhere. You can buy the books and do all the things. But today, I have a very special guest talking about her new book, which is also amazing, about similar parenting techniques that I use myself. So we're going to be speaking the same language. This is going to be a highly enlightening conversation. I know that the parents that I attract, the coaches that I attract to this podcast are looking for tools to do better. I believe that there is not a single parent out there that's like, ooh, let me screw up my kid. We're all trying to find ways, tips, tricks, advice for ourselves, and then advice for our kids on how we can do this hard thing better, which is raising kids in this 24/7 environment. So excited to have Dr. Emily Edlynn on the podcast today. Thank you so much for making time to being here.
Hi, Kirsten. It's so good to be here. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yay. This has been on the docket for a while, so I've been looking forward to this.
Me too.
Let's start right at the beginning. What is autonomy-supportive parenting? How do you define that?
I know. First, I apologize. It is a mouthful, and I had to type it a lot. So trust me, I wish there were a shorter way to say it, but it comes from a whole field of study in psychology. So it is the scientific term for an approach that has been studied since the early 90s. So it's been over 30 years in academia. And my whole mission with this book was to translate it to real life. Like, how can this that's been in these academic journals, supported from decades of evidence, actually help parents today in day-to-day parenting? So what it is it's rooted in a larger theory called self-determination theory. Hang with me. It's more science. But the idea is that each of us has three fundamental needs: to be autonomous, competent, and connected. And that has been studied around the globe, cross-culturally, and it has been shown over and over again that if we feel like those needs are met, we have greater life satisfaction and we're healthier overall. So basically, we're healthier and happier.
Say it again.
We're healthier and happier. Oh, that part. Autonomy, competence. And relatedness is the science term, but I sort of interchange it with connected. So I'll say so what are they? Yeah. Competence is the easy one, right? Competence is feeling like you have skills and abilities and you're confident in your skills and what you have to offer. And then autonomy is very complicated. It's usually interchanged in our Western culture with independence, right? So we immediately think independent. And then some people misunderstand it as, oh, you just do whatever you want. No, that's not what it is. But it is having a sense of agency in your life, that you have choices and you know who you are. You have a strong sense of self, and that actually within relationships with others, you understand where your rights are and where their rights are. And that's living autonomously, all of those things put together. And then relatedness is that connection with others, being in relationship and having a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and a sense of emotional safety.
So do you have studies that show, or maybe in your work that you do, how it's changed over time? What are we seeing? What are the trends around? I feel like our parents parented us in a much more in general, I'm generalizing, but autonomy supportive parenting style versus what we're seeing more of today.
So I've thought a lot about that. I have not found specific research. The recent research coming out, though, is showing significantly less independent children. Like, that is a trend that is supported by evidence, that our kids these days are not as independent or confident.
And why? What are your theses on that?
There are links with intensive parenting. So, and that's what my book is all about, is kind of how to counter the cultural momentum of intensive parenting, which has really become the norm. And I know you've talked about it on your podcast when it comes to youth sports, but it's that really heavily involved parenting and being highly available all the time and making all these decisions for your kid, doing things for your child that they can do. So that style of parenting really undermines children's own confidence and even their sense of who they are, because they can't figure out who they are when their parents are making choices for them and telling them what they're doing, where they're going, what they're signing up for. And I will say, I really try not to finger point at parents because we're in a pressure cooker right now. So I think our parenting landscape has also changed significantly since the 80s when many of us were growing up. And there's just a lot more uncertainty about how to make sure our children have stable, successful futures. And so I think we do feel the pressure to make sure that they're going to be okay. The irony is we're actually making it less likely with our intensive parenting practices.
So how do we do that?
So there's
$1 million question.
This book that I wrote. No, just kidding.
No, please. Yeah. Plug away.
So, it was really interesting to write this book and parent my own 3 children at the same time. And it really helped me to become more aware of where I was having some controlling impulses. So in the book, I really refer to it as controlling parenting. It's very similar to intensive parenting. And I just realized there's all these opportunities for us to actually look at, where does my child have a sense of agency right now? Like, is that maybe why we're fighting? Like, they feel like they have no choice or no say or no control over this. I looked for opportunities to say, I think you can make your own food. Like, wait a minute. Like, you can be in charge of getting all your gear together or whatever. Like, we just get in this automatic mode of doing so much for our children. So I think there's the expecting independence piece that we can all be doing more of, offering choices, getting our children's input. So there's a lot in the literature about just collaborating with our children and problem solving with them, asking, what are your ideas for what to do about this, rather than launching into our ideas of how to solve a problem.
Do you have some examples from with your own kids of times that you've done that, or they've told you, Mom, back off? Or
Well, yeah, I'm really lucky to have children who have strong drives for autonomy, so they keep me in check. They will tell me when they've got it. Thank you very much. In fact, I remember when my oldest, she was probably around 11, and I was telling her to clean her room. And she said, I was going to until you told me to. And she said, when you tell me to do something like that, it makes me want to do it less. And I'm like, well, yeah, we can all say like that's the rebellious spirit of that age group. But honestly, it's kind of human, right? Like when someone's telling us to do something, we don't want to do it anymore. So it's a little bit, I've talked to other parents. It's not this sneaky, but it's a little bit like, make it your kid's idea, like just having these little strategies. For room cleaning, for example, I'll say, so when's a good time to clean your room today? So it's not, you have to do it right now. There's still the expectation they're going to do it. So it's not autonomy like, well, I don't care about cleaning my room, so I'm not going to. Although some would argue they have the right to keep their rooms how they want to. But in our house, I don't want bugs, and there are reasons. So that's the other part of autonomy supportive parenting, is giving rationales for why you're having a rule or an expectation. So it's not just because I said so. It's, we will get ants if you don't like bring the dishes down to the sink,
right.
So I think it's finding that balance of, here are expectations, and here's where there's choice within that, and where our children can flex their agency.
Yeah, my youngest is 17, and I still definitely, she told my husband a couple weeks ago that, he said, we just had this great conversation. Okay, well, she spoke 95% of the time, and I basically said yes or no. And I do feel like again, I believe we teach what we need to learn too. So you're right. As I was writing my book, same thing where you're like, oh, okay, I don't do that well, or but I find so much of they just want to share, and I don't know that I feel like I want my opinion in there, but you just want to validate what they're saying. And even sometimes she don't even want it validated. She's like, yeah, no, I'm good. Just let me go. Right?
Yeah, right.
And you're like, oh, but I wanted to tell you that I agree with you. No, I'm not interested in hearing whether you agree with me or not.
Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I'm like, oh, like, so we were on the way to the airport last week, and and of course it's one of those, you're like, ooh, she's actually speaking to me.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
There's that great,
like, don't blow it. Don't say the wrong thing.
There's that great Tina Fey. Have you seen that? She
I have seen it.
Interviewed, right? And
yeah.
she's like, you go to and you knock on the door and you're like, we're doing that thing. We're going to have like the meal together, and you're like, you're more nervous than going on a date, right? Like you hope she'll say yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating though, when you realize you're like in your head while you're talking to your kid about something that you shouldn't really be in your head about.
I know. It's so funny. And our kids will just call us out, and it's so good for us, I think, to just be like, and if we can be open to that and just kind of take it, right, as, okay, well, this is one way for them to tell me what they need. I mean, my kids will say, because I'm a psychologist who works with kids, they'll say, stop being so therapist-y. And I'm like, I can't help it. It's just how I ask questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do we have some tools that, like, for the average person, how do we do a better job at this?
Yeah, I think I always say the very first step is building our own self-awareness of like when we are getting those impulses to take over, to rescue, to do something for our child. And it's often from a place of wanting to protect them and help them. But if we can like tune into that and then take a pause and question, like, does my child really need this from me? That is the biggest first step. In the book, I use throughout very common parenting dilemmas, I use scripts just to give examples to contrast. Like this would be a controlling response, and then this would be an autonomy-supportive response. So it's very concrete. But a lot of the steps, typically, you start with empathy, unless your child doesn't want it and says, I don't need that. But empathy, perspective taking. So the idea of really trying to use curiosity to understand your child's experience with a situation. So let's say they make a terrible decision about posting something on social media, right? And the first instinct would be to come down really hard on them, to like be clear that that was a big mistake and maybe it was risky and you have like concerns about their safety, but they're going to shut down. I mean, the shame will hit. They're not going to talk to you. You'll do all the talking. And then what have they truly learned? What have you learned? Not much about what was going on for them. So in that example, it's using curiosity and approaching them in a way that they will feel comfortable and safe opening up rather than feeling judged.
Are you open to doing a role play? Shall we role play?
Sure.
I'm the kid. You're the parent.
So fun.
You just found what I posted and it was not appropriate.
Okay.
So should we do the bad way first or the good way first?
Let's do the bad way. Okay, let's do the bad way.
Yeah.
Okay. Kirsten, what the hell were you thinking? Why would you do that?
Well, I don't know. It's just what I felt like posting.
Well, I don't know what's in your head, because clearly you are not mature enough to be using this. And guess what? You've lost your phone forever now.
What?
Yeah. Over, right? So that was, invalidating a child's perspective, like not even wanting to hear about it. It was judging and shaming. Like what? Why would you do that? And it was using threats and punishment.
Yeah. None of which will open the door to more communication.
No. Yeah. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to sneak around.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I just have to be more creative to try to game the system, right?
Yep. Yeah. And how do you feel about your mom right now?
Not good. Yeah. We're not going to talk.
Exactly.
I'll show
Now,
you.
and it's not about, I just want to be clear, it's not about needing our kids to like us. That's not it, right? Sometimes we're going to have to say things they don't like or do things that they don't like for their own well-being. But it's the idea of just keeping the communication lines open. Okay, so should we do the autonomy supportive
Yeah,
way?
let's start the other way.
Okay. So Kirsten, I'm really curious, like what went on for you when you decided to post this on Instagram?
Well, my friends and I were just having fun, and we just thought it would be funny if I put it on there, because then that way I'd get more likes, and then all my friends can comment on it, and I just thought it would be funny.
Okay, so this was kind of doing it with your friends, like they kind of were part of the decision and you
Well, not
were
at the moment. I mean, we talked about it together, and then I was home, and
okay.
later I just, it's exciting when everybody likes it right away.
Yeah.
That makes me feel good. So I was just like, I thought it would be fun to share.
Okay. So getting the likes feels good. Okay.
Really good.
Yeah.
Don't you like? Don't you like? I get more likes than you do on my posts.
I know. I know you
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
And I see that that's important to you right now. I'm wondering though, what do you see as the downsides of what you posted? Was there anything that you see as a problem?
Well, maybe somebody wouldn't like it, or like Susie didn't talk to me the next day because she was like offended. But whatever, like that's her problem, not mine.
Okay. So you don't really care how this affects Susie.
Well, I mean, kind of, because we are best friends since kindergarten. But
Mm,
she'll get over it.
okay. Well, we'll see. I mean, how do you want to handle it with Susie now?
I don't know.
How do you think she's feeling?
Well, she might be upset, but we were all joking about it together earlier, so I don't know why she would be offended.
Okay. Well, I want you to maybe just think about what it might be like if you were in her situation, in her shoes. Just think about it. We don't have to talk about it. And then I want to tell you that my concern is that we have had these rules about what you post, and this broke that rule. So we need to have a talk about what to do next with that.
Well, don't yell at me. You don't have to yell at me about it.
Yeah, it feels like I'm yelling, even though my voice is pretty calm. So let's talk about, I want you to think about what you think an appropriate consequence would be.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't mean to do it. I wasn't trying to hurt anybody.
Okay. It sounds like though you did hurt someone, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I want you to do is I want you to spend some time thinking about what this was like for Susie, what you think we should do about it next based on our family rules, and then we're going to talk again tomorrow.
All right, fine. Ooh, you got
Yeah.
me.
You're like, oh,
Ooh.
I was going to still have attitude.
No, then I'm repentant. I'm like, oh, okay, I
Right.
get it. I would think, again, I don't think any kid sets out to like, but the fact that you're aware of it, right, is even just the awareness is probably a relief.
Yeah.
Because, right, they know they did, when you've done something wrong, and particularly if you've made a friend mad or embarrassed yourself or the family. Of course, that's not the goal.
Right. And the dismissing, which kids do, right? Oh, but it's not that big of a deal. That's their own defenses because they don't want to feel ashamed of it. And so the best thing you can do as a parent is do everything in your power to not be part of that shame and put it back on them. You notice how I did that. I kept putting it back on you. And I think that's showing trust that your child has that empathy and capacity. They were just not using it right then. But it's like giving them that opportunity to be better, right? And that is in them. So that was fun. You're the first podcast to do a role play.
Susie and I used to do these all the time, and I love it. And when she does, I mean, first I was just thinking, I wish Susie Walton, let's be specific, was here, because that's what she does with her parenting groups. And I think it really helps to model it so that you can hear the difference. Because when you tell somebody the theory behind it, you're like, yeah, that's obvious. But when you start actually incorporating it into your dialogue, it makes it very black and white as to, I think, how it can be helpful.
Yep, I agree. Well, thank you for participating.
Should we do one? I would love to. So I would love to talk about, I know you just wrote a blog about being at your kids' soccer game.
Yes.
So we can bring this full circle to sports, because
that's why we're here.
Why we're here. So
Everyone's like, when are the sports coming in?
I've been waiting. We're 20 minutes in. No, but it's similar, right? We're not just parenting an athlete. Obviously,
Right.
we're trying to raise
Hopefully.
good human beings, right? And
Right.
yes, that's the whole premise of my work as well, which is it's a part of it. And how do we become, again, more in control? Speaking of agency, of our own, how we show up on the sidelines.
Yep.
And I think the thing that I get called out, I call out myself on, is it's interesting. Again, we're old enough now, and again, not all parents do this, but we're old enough now to know how we should behave.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily, sometimes for some people, they don't care and they're going to behave how they want to behave. But even if you behave outwardly the right way, it doesn't necessarily mean that's how you feel on the inside.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
So, so in fact, fresh example, we just got back from New York last night, and my son is now a freshman in college, and he's been, had an amazing career, but now he's at the next level even. And we flew across the country to go watch him play, and he got 0 minutes on the court.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's a freshman, right? So you can say,
Right.
oh, he's just a freshman. So suck
Yeah.
it up, Buttercup. And part of that's fully true.
Right.
And I actually was in that, it was at Syracuse. So you're you're practically at the big dance, and you're like, wow, this is just cool. And what was interesting was I did check myself, and I thought, I'm just still in awe of him being here, that I was okay with it.
Yeah.
And that actually is a new space for me, because I'm so competitive.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. And we got back to the hotel room that night, and my husband's like, okay, I'm not going to lie. He's like, I kind of just really wanted them to sub my kid in.
I know. Of course.
Right?
Of course you do. Yes.
And we do have some recent experience with our older son having exactly that same experience, which for 3 years, COVID included, him not getting on the floor much. So I'm saying this again as a general example, because I know there are thousands of parents out there, millions of parents out there that can relate to this story. In fact, I saw a friend over the weekend. Her son's playing D1 lacrosse. They have 50 kids on the roster. Like,
what?
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why? That's just a recipe for disaster, right? Like, that means, 11 are on the field. Like, even in a really good game, maybe 20 play. But to have
not even half, right?
Not even half will get to see the field. So let's go deep on playing time. Yeah. And how does it feel from the parenting perspective? And what advice would you have?
Yeah, I had this very recent experience. Now, my kids are younger, so I'm newer to this whole world. But my youngest is 9, and it's his first year doing travel soccer. And we actually picked a club team that, of 2 choices, is sort of the least intense, allegedly. That's the word on the street, right? And so it was very intentional to, let's start this gently. And it's been a great season, and they had their first tournament a couple of weekends ago. So it was our first time doing this whole, like, multiple games in a weekend. And man, that's very time consuming. But I noticed, so he's really into being a defender, and most kids his age are really into scoring goals, right? And so he just loves being on defense, and he's good. He's very good at it. And we are just watching these tournament games, and he's playing like 10 minutes here, a few minutes there, and he's just playing less than usual. And then they had a league game, so it wasn't part of the tournament, but it was the first game all season they've lost. And he had played only the first 10 minutes of that game and never went back in. And at the end of the game, he's usually very stoic, and he's very, like, he adapts to losing. Like, it doesn't shake him. He was so upset. And what he said was, I barely played. And, like, he wanted to help his team more. And everything in me wanted to talk to the coach. My little sweet baby is only 9 years old, and the coach is a really nice guy. And I held myself back. I said, well, honey, maybe you could talk to the coach about playing time and what can you do to play more? And he's like, nope, not doing that. And I said to him on the drive home, I'm very aware of the literature about the drive home after a game being the worst. So I try to be very careful. And I said, I want to listen if you want to talk more about this, but if you don't, that's okay too. And he stayed quiet. We came home and carved pumpkins and he had a snack. And then we raced off to the final game of the weekend, which was the championship. So his team had made the championship of the tournament. And we got to the field and he went out there like with a fire I have never seen. And I realized, I'm like, he's going out there to show why he should play instead of just talking about it. And you know what? I realized I could have easily talked to the coach and I would have just never known, did he get more playing time because I stepped in or because he earned it? And it was such a good lesson for me. You know, I had to tell myself, what would I tell another parent? Because I so badly wanted to step in.
Yes.
So it was a very good lesson. And it led to me being so proud of him because I saw something in him I hadn't seen yet. So that opportunity, that wouldn't have happened if I got involved. So it really reinforces like the message of just stay out of it.
And what happened after that game? Tell me the car ride home from that game.
Oh, he couldn't stop talking about it. And he said, we can talk about it.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk and talk and talk.
Aw, good. Yeah.
He was so happy.
Right? Yeah. It is that story of we're going to steal their opportunity to learn. And exactly. I think when you realize that it's not about trying to like rub some salt in it or rub some grout over it and mask it.
Right.
But rather allow them to feel what they need to feel. And I would think boys are much different than girls. I thought of another example as you were telling that story of a guy who said, that's not who I am. Don't ask me a bunch of questions. But yet that doesn't mean they're not thinking about it, right? That doesn't mean that they're not doing the work that's going to help them be better, which that's a wonderful story. I love that.
Well, and my 12-year-old does competitive gymnastics, and that's a whole world. And my older one did it first and quit after 3 years. She was done at the age of 12. But my middle one is really into it. And we had this Positive Coaching Alliance come and like meet with us. And of course, they were speaking my language of basically like parents, you need to stay out of it. But it was really interesting. They advised, ask your athlete, what do they want you to do when they have a bad outing? Like ask them before it happens, right? And so I asked my daughter and she surprised me with what I wouldn't have guessed it, right? So I think it's like, we also assume that we know, right? We know our kids so well. We need to give them the chance to for them to show us who they are, especially because they're always changing, And
I think it's so good because I don't know that they know, because it's in that moment, like I may have one reaction or I may have the other. And by the way, both of them are fine. Yeah. Like you don't have to always say, yes, I want to talk about it, or no, I don't. But just even to get them, again, just asking them to articulate it, well, I don't know, but right now it kind of feels like, I don't think I'd really want to talk about it. Yeah. And then we'd be like, okay, so noted. And then on the car ride home, okay, I know you don't want to talk about it. I just want to say I had fun watching you play today. And that was great. Yeah. Okay. And then, well, you know what? Actually, I do kind of want to talk. You kind of open the door to them being able to choose a different adventure, right? It's okay. And I was in Dallas a couple of weeks ago, and this cute mom, she had a 5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And she's like, my husband's crazy. He's already paying for the 5-year-old to get private coaching because he was a decent soccer player and he didn't play in college. So he's pretty sure that the 5-year-old's going to get there, but we got to get on it now. Right. And so she was just talking about how, trying not to interject what she thinks the outcome should be versus the way he's experiencing it.
Yeah.
And she was like, how do I support my kid,
Yeah.
but make sure that I'm not stepping on my husband's toes? So what about divergent parenting styles?
Well, no, that's really hard. And I'm just going to say that all of the science in parenting, it works better when both parents are on the same page, which is also common sense. So I do think that the co-parents need a heart-to-heart, right? Of like coming together on what this is going to look like and what their priorities are. I think it's maybe seeking some outside support to like help them talk about it if they're at very different places. It sounds like dad, and this is true for a lot of parents and a lot of different reasons, like we have our own issues that we are bringing to the table, right? And the more aware we are of those, the less of a hold they have, and they don't actually have to play out through our kids. But I know this happens in sports all the time. It's like dreams deferred, right? Like,
yeah.
But it's so confining for our child. And when we're thinking, like, do you want to raise a child who knows who they are in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're telling them who they are their whole growing up, they won't. They won't know. Mm-hmm. And they will hit adulthood and be lost. And you see a lot of bad stuff happen then.
I like to say you've got to parent the child you have, not the one you wish you had. And yes. That I think is, I mean, it can happen in any world. And I know theater parents tell me, and, whatever, like you can go into any, avenue, but sports parents in particular, like, again, yes, of course you would love to have the kid that's going to go pro or whatever, but it's amazing to me the number of people that, and again, we're kind of in the same realm of going out and speaking on our books, but the number of parents that come up to you with a straight face and say, well, I know other people's kids are, bright and athletic, but mine are really special, right?
I know.
And you're like, oh, that came out of your mouth.
Yeah, right.
And again, not that your kid's not special, like, and not, I believe every child is special, and every child has a gift.
Superior. So I think there's a difference between special and superior.
Yes. Right? So how do you help them?
You stumped me. I don't know. I mean, I think it's like, again, we have to see our kids for who they are. And that is where the empathy and perspective taking that we practiced earlier comes into play. Like if you're having a really big decision to make about which team to be on, or like, do we give up this sport to spend more time on this sport? I mean, coming at your child with very open-ended questions to help them explore their thought process and think critically about it. That is where you're helping them be special and like live who they are and what their strengths are, rather than telling them this is what I think is best for you and steering them in that direction. So I think, we're all human, and honestly, sports, I could talk about youth sports forever. I mean, I have so many strong opinions, but I think that it brings out the best and the worst, right?
So what are you seeing in your practice around that? Like, what are the biggest issues?
I mean, I think the pressure. I think the biggest issue is pressure on these kids at younger and younger ages to be competitive rather than have fun. There is definitely a place for competition as kids mature, and there's ways that it's very healthy, but I think it's happening too young, when really the purpose needs to be skill building, fun, friendships, social development. And we're kind of losing sight, I think, of the huge benefits of sports that have nothing to do with athleticism, right? Like character development and work ethic and being part of a team, like a productive member. And if we're so focused on competitiveness and achievement and, being the best, we're losing all of that. And I see also just the loss of family time, downtime, rest, relaxation. When kids are taking on 3 sports at a time, no one's ever home, I think a lot is being sacrificed.
Yeah, 100% agree with all of it. Yeah, the idea that we've given up every vacation, that, and the framework that sticks for me, and like I like to say now, is like you only get 18 summers with them.
Yeah.
And when you're deciding at 8 and 10 that the most important thing you can do all summer is attend every travel whatever event, and not spend even 4 or 5 days for grandma's 90th, or for the
Right.
hiking, the family camping trip, or whatever, where they're going to make the memories.
Yes.
That's what they're going to take away. And the one story that always comes to mind right now is my oldest basketball 24/7, like, came out of the womb wanting to shoot baskets, and 15, he was just sure he's going to play in college. So we go to Vegas for the tournament, and it's 2 weeks at the time, back to back. Vegas in July in 120-degree heat is always fun, right? And why would you want to spend 2 weeks doing that?
Oh my
So I
gosh.
said, okay, fine, we'll go to the first one, but then it's the 1 week that your dad actually can take off. So we're going to drive up to, Jackson Hole, Wyoming to do some family stuff. And I have a vivid recollection of him sitting in the back of the raft,
Right.
pouting, right?
Not
Like,
going to enjoy this.
as if
right.
you've ruined my childhood. And here, flash forward, right, is one, nobody was recruiting you at 15.
Right.
And if they were, they'll still be recruiting you at 16 and 17 and 18. And number two, he has zero recollection of pouting. When
Really? Yeah.
I've brought it up to him, like, do you remember that? He's like, yeah, Jackson Hole, that was fun. Like, we went water rafting, and I'm like, do you remember how you behaved in the raft? He's like, no, what do you mean? Like, you were a jerk, And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I get it, parents, where you're feeling that, like, A, FOMO, and
Yeah.
B, oh, I'm going to ruin their childhood by not, and we're going to be behind, and he won't
Yeah.
even have any fun anyway. Well, too bad. Like, you have two younger siblings and your family who would like to do something other than just be inside of a gym.
Well, think of the messaging, we kind of complain about raising entitled kids. What are we doing? We're like showing them that their needs come before anything else. We will sacrifice our money, our time, our memory making for you to do these special camps, or like elevate skills. Like, it's so above and beyond.
Mhm.
And what are they absorbing? What is that message to them?
Yeah.
So,
all right, let's do one more big topic, and then I'll have to let you go. So let's talk about sideline behavior.
Oh,
and what we're seeing, right? Like, so the frontal, you can't, with the kids, you can kind of say, okay, the frontal lobe is wide open and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, but here we are with 30, 40, 50-year-old, mostly men, but also women who are not behaving the way you would assume at a youth sports. And I feel like every day you see another story that sometimes ends up in the worst possible outcome, right? Of death. And then it's always like interesting to scroll down to see, it was an 8U soccer game, or a 10U hockey team game, or whatever. And how do we navigate this, or what is going on?
Yeah, I think it's easier to say, what the heck is going on here? And that same tournament for my son, there was a whole group of parents at a game on the pitch next to us that was thrown out. The ref booted them. And these were a bunch of 8-year-old girls that they were watching. And all I could think about as a child psychologist were those girls watching their parents have to get up and leave because they couldn't be civil on the sidelines. And how sad that was for me to see these girls. I mean, we have to remember they're watching us. Like, what are we wanting to teach our kids about how to interact with other people and manage high emotions? So I think what's happening is the competitiveness and the pressure. We are becoming so activated by that we I don't know, there's a woman called Wendy Grolnick who's written about the pressured parent phenomenon. And it's this idea, like, when we watch our kids compete, we feel like their whole lives are at stake. And so we get really aroused and activated. And then we're in like primal mode. and not using our frontal lobe. And I think it's just kind of being aware that that's a risk and planning ahead that we're not going to do that and we're not going to act that way. And I think there's a group mentality that can happen, right?
Mhm.
And so if there are people in your group that can go, off, then like don't just keep your space from them. Like don't get pulled into it. I do think there's some behavioral strategies that can help, reminding yourself, what do I want my kid to see in me? What do I want to teach? And how would I want my child to act? And trying to come back to your own parenting values instead of the emotion in the moment. Because really at that tournament, they were the only group of parents I saw kicked out. Most parents could handle themselves. I did hear some like kind of bad comments about a poor 14-year-old ref. And I'm like, he's 14 or he looked at most 14. So I think we need to also hold each other accountable, like have some courage to speak up in the stands and say, hey, those are kids out there,
Yeah, I was asked that by two women came up to me after one of the talks and said, we're on the same team. We got the husband and wife are both just, they're, off the plot, like totally lost the plot on, we're 10U and we just want the kids to have a good time. What do we do?
Yeah.
And I love your advice of A, separate yourself, and then B, what are the values of the club and what are the values of that coach? And maybe it's a team meeting, maybe it's a parent meeting, but we need to when the temperature isn't high, not after the house is on fire, but again, ideally at the beginning of the season. Maybe that's what needs to happen at the beginning of every season is we're going to focus on friends, fun, and fundamentals. And parents, forget the FOMO. And if you really think your kid is all that, then maybe this isn't the club for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Our rec club, the AYSO soccer here, would send out emails. They're like, okay, this week we're having Silent Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And it was the kids' favorite day of the year. Yeah. What does that say about what our kids are experiencing? That they don't mind it when you can zip it. Yeah, because we just want to play. So allow us to just play and not make it about you. Because when they're thinking that we're upset, they're upset and they're just trying to make us happy, right?
Yes. And then they're repressing what's really going on for them. And I also want people to reflect on what kind of relationships they want with their kids too. Mm-hmm. And how they're behaving aligned with that relationship or not. So
what if your kid, because again, even in rec,
right,
sometimes you get a coach that you don't really agree with how they coach. What advice would you have for parents who talk about, gosh, we just want to have fun, and this coach is so intense and he's so over the top or she's so over the top? How do we
that is a tough one. I've actually been in that situation. It wasn't super black and white, so it wasn't like, but I actually just talked to my son about his experience with it. I wanted to know what it was like for him, and we just kept echoing to him, the process part instead of the outcome. You're learning this and you're, getting to know these kids and you're having fun. Like we just kept our focus on not the goals and the winning and all of that. And I kind of would ask him, like, what's it like? This coach is different from your other coaches. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you notice? I noticed the kids are like kind of yelling at each other on the field, and that hasn't happened before on your teams. So kind of showing him that we're paying attention and interested in his experience, even if he's not, giving us a ton of feedback about it yet. But it wasn't anything super egregious, but it was like, and we weren't going to stick. It was only 2 months, so it wasn't a big commitment. But I think it's, communicating with our kids and having the bigger picture of what kind of experience do we want them to have, but how are they experiencing it too? And having them start to think about what kind of coaches they want,
This is fabulous. We could talk all day.
I know.
But let's wrap up with the one question I like to ask. We like to ask all the guests, and you get to change it a little bit. But we usually say, please answer this question. How would you fill in this blank? Which is, the best athletes I know do this. The best sports parents I know do this. How would you fill that in?
I would say they show their child love no matter what happens on the field or on the court.
When we do conditional parenting, right? I'll be happy if, and that's what we're seeing, exactly to your earlier point, right? Is their whole identity becomes tied to that outcome. And that's, I mean, the college cheating scandal too. We could talk about that all day. Like, it's the exact same thing, that my happiness and my parents' happiness in me is tied to whether I get the trophy, whether I get into that school, whether I get this outcome, right?
Right. And so then what happens when that outcome doesn't happen? What happens to their identity and sense of self, right?
Do you see ties? I mean, sorry, we go on about the suicide and depression and mental health crisis that's going on. Particularly, it's so surprising when a lot of it is the elite athletes at these universities who,
I know,
by all means, have it all.
Have it all, right?
Yeah.
But they don't have a balanced sense of self or a strong sense of self. I don't know them, but when you have one identity so fused in one area, that is high risk for mental health problems. When you're not fulfilled or satisfied and something goes wrong in that area, you don't have the other parts to fall back on for cushioning.
So what are red flags, or what are things that parents can be looking for with even younger athletes? And again, forget college, but just even with our young kids, what are you focused on?
Well, honestly, I think it's looking for any change in their sense of joy. When it seems like they're dragging themselves to practice, or they just don't seem as into it or excited, that's a big red flag that I think parents don't want to see. And so they don't. And the kids may not feel like they can ever actually say it to their parents. And so they are going through the motions. If they start to perform a lot worse suddenly, there's probably something going on emotionally to check in on. So I would say those are two big red flags.
It's so hard to know too, because my kid's moody, like they're a teenager.
Yeah.
They didn't sleep last night.
Yeah.
So how do you discern?
Be more sustained. It would be more sustained. Yeah. You definitely, with kids, especially around puberty, like it would be for a few weeks, of a pattern. Yep. And even you have to notice first, but then asking them, like, are you still enjoying this? Has it changed for you? I've noticed it seems different. Just letting them know you'd be willing to hear it if something has changed for them. But I think paying attention to those signs.
And one last thing. I keep having new ideas. I want to talk about COVID and what impact that's had on, again, our kids and their ability and opportunity to emote and to share what they're going through. Like, how has your practice changed through all of that? And as a parent, as yourself?
So honestly, I think the biggest after effects of COVID on child development is that a lot of kids are behind, like, socially in ways that we don't expect. And so they are having a harder time navigating big groups. So if you think about teams, it may just be like skills are a little delayed right now compared to what age we think they should be at. And I've heard from middle school teachers that they're seeing that they are having to meet middle schoolers at a younger age, because middle schoolers now were like fifth, fourth, third in COVID, and so there's still catch up happening. So I think it's recognizing that there may be some, just a little bit of a younger than we would expect, especially with navigating social situations.
Well, and this is a question. So also with COVID plus the social media / addiction to iPhones and whatever, that they're not interacting face to face. We're not having one-on-one conversations. Most of their lives is, again, I joke, my oldest thinks that food is just ordered through an app, right?
Right.
Like, oh, you actually have a kitchen where you live now. You can actually go to a grocery and make your own food, right? So like,
Yeah.
but emotional social development isn't happening
Right.
obviously through COVID, but now like so much of their understanding of what's supposed to be happy is what they see on their phone.
Absolutely. And this is where sports can be a huge benefit, right? They're out of the house, they're active, they're with other people. So it's a great outlet. It's just when it gets too intense and overwhelming that it can have these negative effects. And I know with our kids, we don't have strict rules around phone use or anything, but goes along with expectations of a lot of things, but including spending time with friends in person. And so I do think that should be a priority, however it can be orchestrated, is that these kids are together in person, not in structured activities, like just hanging out.
Well, and to that point, for the coaches that are listening, this is this. So my daughter's was playing volleyball. We're at a tournament, and the parents were the ones that were like, "Oh, she has to have her phone." And the coach would say, "Put the phone away. We're at the tournament. You're in a big warehouse all day. You're not going." Well, they need to know because they need to be able to text me if they need food.
Nope.
No,
nope.
they don't.
No.
Right?
No.
Like, and so coaches, I think, use your power for good in that. Today we're going to be in the gym all day, on the field all day. You don't need to be checking your social media and you don't need to be talking to your parents. Like you're here, we've got your kid. You guys can go off and do what you want. Like give them and coaches take the leadership. I was just laughing at these parents as they're like, yeah. Well, I can't not have connection with her. Like,
so, right. That's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like it's more the parents sometimes than the kids around that need to constantly be connected, and it's not good for the kids. They really need their own time and space.
And the girls, they get the same. She went on a retreat last year, and like 17 of the 80 girls snuck their phones. And to hear that then the parent, they're going away for 2 nights.
Yeah, right.
And they're with adults. And you remember you used to just call the lodge or whatever if you needed something, right? But what we heard was the parents that were insisting that she go ahead and cheat. And it's okay. I need to be able to talk to you and know that you're okay.
Right. And that comes back to this overprotectiveness that is feeding the intensive parenting that is making autonomy-supportive parenting impossible. So all of this is connected, and it is not healthy for our kids, for us, or our relationships.
But then we can't figure out why our kid is so tethered to us and why they can't move on with their life.
Right.
Lunch. They failed lunch because they've never done anything on their own.
They don't know how. Right. They don't have the confidence.
Go to camp. They don't have the confidence. Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. We can go on all day. I'm going to have you back and we can dive into more examples that I get. You can coach me on how to coach everybody else on all of these topics. Like I can just bring up all the examples that I get on a day-to-day basis, which is great. So thank you, Emily. Can you tell everybody where they can buy your book, where they can find you and follow you and like you and share all the great work that you do?
Thank you so much, Kirsten. It's been so much fun. My book is available on Amazon, Bookshop, Target, hopefully anywhere books are sold. There it is. It's so pretty.
Put yours up too. Yes. Here I need it.
And I'm at Dr. Emily Edlynn on all the socials. I also have a Substack called The Art and Science of Mom.
Yay. So follow her on Substack, follow me on Substack, and buy the book, buy both of the books, and you can jump on there and ask her questions. And she's such a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And parents, this is hard. Parenting is hard. Coaching is hard. Being a kid these days is ridiculously hard. Let's all hold hands. We've got this. We can do a better job. When we know better, we do better. You've got this.